And yes, that intro is very true. Everything changes. So I'm going to tell you my story in brief. It's according to that, I'm going to give myself max of 15 minutes, aiming at 12, 10 to 12. And the reason being is because then I can post this as a video in some places that like short videos on them. And that's a good time. Anyway, my story in brief. All right. Well, I was born to two veterans of World War II, at least one of which I am pretty sure had PTSD. I don't know about the other, but I can surmise a lot of things. That was the emotional environment into which I was born. So that already interrupts the development of a child. And I learned some of this by reading Bowlby's book on attachment styles and Heal Developmental Trauma by, his name's escapes me right now. And since I got a time limit, if I get back to it, I will. In any event, he created the method NARM, Neural Affect Relational Model, something like that. Anyway, my story in brief. Because of those relationships, because of those disturbances in my development, that means I never created trust. I never created how you would choose to trust somebody. That's what that means. Attachment. So if the attachment isn't there, you're looking for the first person then who comes along and says, "Hey, attaboy," and shows you some attention, some connection. And then self-regulation, so forth and so on, until you get down to the teenage years of love and sex. And then there's, imagine that being dysregulated. Yeah. In any event, that was the stage. So that by the time I reached my 13th year, that's when I started doing drugs. And that was just about the time of the hippies. So guess who I fit in with? And guess who attaboyed me? And guess who? Yeah. Well, so that's where I stayed for, well, I'm going to say about 8 years until I realized, and for me, my drug of choice was psychedelics because I figured if I psychedelic myself enough, I was going to cross over something like the blood-brain barrier into, some spiritual coolness, whatever. That didn't work. I got close to a hospital bed a couple times. One not with psychedelics, but the one time, my last trip. It was a doozy. But I realized then that drugs weren't the way to get what I was after. In fact, they were headed to a hospital or a psychiatric zone or something a lot more plausibly and probably than anywhere else. So on my 21st birthday, I quit doing that kind of stuff. And it's amazing, just dropped it, just stopped it. So I've learned this about behavioral addictions, and we studied some of this when I went to school at the University of Minnesota years later, when I pursued the academic side of drug and alcohol abuse counseling about addictive behaviors. And that behavioral addictions are fairly easy to change. Whereas if you have a physical addiction to something like alcohol. Now, there was a time when I like right now, if I drank a glass of wine, I'd be way buzzing. Back then, that didn't happen until after 2. And I drink fast. I'm not a sipper. I'm just the way I am. So I learned then that, okay, this is true of me. And I did this counseling and I got good grades. I was running a 4.0 in that coursework, and that was at the University of Minnesota. And I learned a lot about addictive behaviors. Mostly what I had. I couldn't quite, as far as having this inner, man, you're learning about something that you need to deal with on your own. And finally, I had that said to me in a different kind of context, but there you have it. So I switched my addictions repeatedly over the years. And those included things like relationships, I guess I could say sex, and then um, theater, community theater, anything really to stay away from anything that created any sort of intimacy. Because no addict likes to have their pain exposed. They just want something that will create an escape, whether that's an actual real escape. I'm out of the place that's going to put the light on me and see me for who I really am, and or an escape. This is a poor edition of a wine bottle or a glass of wine. I don't have any of that stuff. So it could be drugs, it could be alcohol, it could be video games, it could be buying stuff, um, buying stuff, books, intellectualism, video games, sex, religion. Oh, after my drugs, that's where I went. But when my emotional needs became quite real, the church dropped me like a hot potato. Spirituality, spiritual bypassing, all of these things can be drugs. And so I spent years in and out of these until they just weren't, I don't want to say they weren't working for me anymore. They were creating a pressure I was trying to avoid. So that's when you switch alcohol. And then there's even good looking ones like being a firefighter. Now, the reason I got into firefighting is because I wanted to serve my community without being involved in politics. If you're a firefighter, you can laugh at that. Firefighter, EMT, anybody from dispatcher all the way down to the coroner. Yeah, no politics involved. Yeah, you just go ahead and correct a lieutenant. Hey, put your visor down when you're cutting wood. Blink. Holy moly, you are going. Oh, lieutenant, he might. No, he was a captain then. Yeah. In any event, and I get it. Our visors were they clear or kind of yellow? Maybe mine was yellow from fire. Anyway, yeah, there's politics involved. All along here, you add that my changing jobs, having kids, all kinds of stuff that I was involved with because you're still trying to live life, even though you have this inner hell going on. And so what ends up happening is you get to a certain point, now you're a firefighter and you're doing all these kinds of things and you're 24/7 and you look really, really, really good. And mind you, I was always really good at my jobs. I did production and inventory control for 20 years. And then when I realized that American corporations had absolutely no desire to learn what the Japanese were doing, which they used to kick our butts in terms of the automotive industry, well, guess what? I left that too. Decided, okay, nobody wants to do this. Why should I? And then, there was one time I was asked to illegally sign an inventory report. No, illegally. Yes, I'll say the request was illegal because the guy who was asking me was A Mormon, and B, knew that the report was not accurate. It had doctored numbers on it, and doctored meaning there were certain numbers they weren't putting in there that they knew were off so that it could help them get into an IPO situation. I'm sorry. He was the boss, not me. And I said, you signed that damn thing. So they fired me. Okay, cool. So I went into carpentry. Part of that was because A, needed a job, and I happened to be in a place where I look up at a guy and says, you need a hand? Because he was doing something that needed a hand. And I was kind of like living there, but I didn't own the place. Anyway, need a hand? He said, sure. So I helped him out. I understood what he was asking for, so forth, so on. So when it was done, he says, you want a job? Sure. I didn't even care how I was getting paid because I wasn't making anything at the time anyway. I was in one of those between job places and where the job market was not huge. So I left. And then I finally got a year later a shift, a move back to Minnesota, uh, another job of inventory and production control. And that turned out to be, I don't want to say illegal, it was shady. They used me and then later dropped. Anyway, doesn't matter. Details don't matter. Got back into carpentry, did that for the next 20 years. And there was all, still carrying this, becoming a firefighter. And that's what kind of got me out here. And finally did that. Yep, did theater here. Oh, had that escape. And then finally on Christmas Day, 2011, all this shit that I've been carrying, all the stuff I've been running from, and all the stuff I've been doing was all too heavy. And on that Christmas Day in 2011, on a scene, an emergency scene, I had a breakdown. And it took me a while to recover from that. And by that time, I was living in a tent. So it had gotten to that. And so when I say that this is my story, that's not to say that every moment of life, it isn't here. Oh, it is in here. My outer was all looking good. And that's where I was looking for all my answers, because maybe I can get some of this niceness out here into here. But that completely misunderstands what stress and traumatizing stress is. That completely misunderstands the needs. I was not integrated. Love and sex, like I said, it did. Hose me up bad. Trust, gone. Attachment, gone. All to the wrong people, wrong places, wrong bat time, wrong bat channel, all the way down the line. You can take all of these little things and find the root back in childhood. That was my life. Out here, I looked pretty good. I had nice jobs. I wore did I have a suit? I think I wore a tie. I don't know if I ever had a suit, but that was my life. Now the next 5 posts are going to be about, or 6 or so, will be about what has happened to me because I healed my trauma. Talk to you later. Bye.